show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is a Friday, April 1st. It is definitely a very interesting day. I'm sure you know this by now. This is not April Fool's, but Amazon lost today. They lost. Staten Island workers, the Amazon Labor Union, ALU, won the vote. It was close, but they won. And that's after Amazon pulled all the tricks that they normally pull. So congratulations to everyone in Staten Island who has been organizing for years, who lost one fight, kept going, and did it on their own without outside help. A tight crew led by our dear friend, Christian Smalls. I really have nothing else to say today except congratulations. This is how you do it. You're an inspiration. As my mentor texted me a few minutes ago, this is history. This is history. So I just want to take this moment to honor Chris Smalls and the ALU crew and all Amazon workers across the country organizing, trying to do the same thing. All workers organizing across the country, fighting for fair labor. This is a show today all about labor and the intersectionality of how really, we start off the show today talking about women's health. But, you know, the reason why there's an attack on women's health is there's a right-wing, white supremacist, religious aspect to this, which has, the same places around the country where unions have been completely wrecked, right-to-work states are the same states where we're seeing women's health under attack. And, of course, that's going all the way to the Supreme Court, as well as the fight against labor. Labor is an intersectional issue, and we are going to talk about that all day today. This is it. This is a show. If you wanted to talk about labor, this is the show. If you wanted to hear about how labor intersects with fighting for labor, intersects with fighting for women and people of color, this is the show. Later on, we're going to have Erica Smiley and Sarita Gupta on, the authors of The Future We Need, Organizing for Better Democracy in the 21st Century. And we're going to wrap the show talking about Amazon with the one and only Kim Kelly. But first up, so excited. Really very excited to have this conversation because it's coming up more and more. This conversation is happening more in my life with women I know. Genevieve Grabman is joining us next. She is the author of Challenging Pregnancy, A Journey Through the Politics and Science of Healthcare in America. We will be right back with Genevieve Grabman. All right. So I was reading the New York Times this weekend. Don't shoot me. I know some of you are critical. Call me old-fashioned. I was reading the New York Times this weekend, and there was a piece that discussed how, I think a lot of women know this, how the medical industry is basically ignoring half of the population, that the amount of money, the focus, there are blind spots all over the industry when it comes to women's health. And our next guest is, she wrote a book called Challenging Pregnancy, A Journey Through the Politics and Science of Healthcare in America. I got it right here. That just discusses just that. Genevieve Grabman is the author of Challenging Pregnancy. She's also a policy and communications lead at the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and previously served as Director of Government Relations for Physicians for Reproductive Health, also an attorney, and has worked for the WHO and the Pan American Health Organization. Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. How is my sound? Are you able to hear me
You
well?
sound great. Yes, perfect.
Fantastic, because I'm doing what every mom does. I'm multitasking from my minivan.
From your minivan. I love it.
Absolutely. But
so I want, go ahead.
I was going to say, you are so right that both medical professionals and, more importantly, politicians who try to act as medical professionals without any medical background or knowledge are ignoring more than half of our population, that portion of the population that could fall pregnant. And I'm so concerned about this, and I'm so concerned about it right now as the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is why my publisher and I timed my book to come out now, as the court is considering what to do about abortion in this country, so that we can have a conversation and to ask ourselves, what do we, the people, really want for ourselves and for the health of our people?
It's so interesting because there's a lot of layers to this, right? And what I really appreciate about this book, which stems out of your story, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, is that when you have policies like this, it's not just about abortion, although it is very much about abortion. It's also about just the institutions, the medical, institutions, whether it's in politics and actual decision making, and whether a woman has any sort of authority over her own body. In many ways, but it's also about like funding, how much money is put into women's health. I have my own personal story from this last year. I've told our audience before, those who haven't heard it. I went to go get my eggs frozen last summer in Greece. My family's from Greece. Much, much cheaper. They do a wonderful job. I went to go get my eggs frozen at 37, and they retrieved 3 viable eggs, which is extremely, extremely low for a woman, a healthy woman in her late 30s. And I said to the doctor, a man, and also very religious, that's something that we're not really, they don't openly do that, at least here in our, you don't have like crosses and icons in your health facility. Well, yeah, you're right. So I said to the doctor, I said, as I've done to every single doctor since I was 16 years old, do I have endometriosis? And he looked at me and said, oh, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I don't understand. For at least twice a year since I was 16 years old, I have been asking my doctor if I have endometriosis based on the excruciating menstrual cramps I've had since I was 16, some of which people have called ambulance on me for, and I've dealt with it over the years on my own. And he said, oh, I can measure it through your blood. There's a new way of detecting it in Greece. And I walked away from that and I thought, clearly these things are linked. And he said it so passively. And then I just went through a wave of emotions of anger and frustration and thinking about our medical system and why is it that I was challenged. And then when I came back to my OBGYN here and I told him the story, he scoffed at me. And he's no longer my OBGYN. Anyways, you read these stories now, and I'm so happy that they're finally coming out. Just how women have to literally do research, keep asking, go to different doctors. It was 21 years until I got diagnosed. And if I had known that in my early 30s, maybe I would have frozen my eggs and had a very different situation. We don't know for sure. But this is not an uncommon story. You have a story that you start off your book with, and led you down this path. So I'm very curious, how did this all happen?
So, I'm very interested in your story, and I want to riff off on some of the parts of it, because my story is, just in brief, I got pregnant with identical twins. Those identical twins' blood vessels fused across the amniotic sacs in a condition called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And in addition, the pregnancy was complicated by other conditions, both kind of humorous, like maybe a parasitic triplet, and not so funny, such as selective intrauterine growth restriction, SIGR, and TTTS, the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, and SIGR are both incredibly fatal conditions for the fetuses that suffer from them. And TTTS can also it can be fatal for the pregnant person carrying the pregnancy. because what happens with that condition is that one twin produces almost no amniotic fluid and pumps all its blood away to the recipient twin, who, because that twin is receiving so much blood, produces a ton of amniotic fluid. And that causes all sorts of terrible repercussions for that fetus as it tries to develop, and also for the person carrying the pregnancy. Right. So much pressure from all that amniotic fluid. So that's what happened to me. But then here's where I want to riff off of your story. I went and tried to get help, right? So that's what we do. We go and we show up at doctors' offices and we say, help us, please, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the doctors say something might not be right. And then what do we do about it? And that's where I ran, smack on into the walls of politics, but also religion. Kind of like what you said. You said in Greece that it's open if a physician holds a particular religious viewpoint, but it's also very open in the United States, especially in rural areas where the Catholic Church now has consolidated and controls most hospitalized care. And that means that the Catholic Church controls what obstetrical care and what surgical care is available to those who are having complicated pregnancies. Which means that the care that a person receives, even if that person is not Catholic, is determined by the dogma of the Catholic Church. And that was part of my story, because skipping ahead a couple of steps, I ultimately got discharged from secular hospitals and had to go to what was left for me was a Catholic hospital to provide me care. And it wasn't that I had sought the Catholic hospital out, mind you, I sought a doctor out, like the best doctor around in maternal fetal medicine, but his office happened to be located in the hospital compound of a Catholic hospital, which meant that those dogmatic restrictions applied to him, who was not Catholic, and to me, who is Catholic, but did not want those restrictions to apply to me. I wanted medicine and science to determine the outcome of my pregnancy and my health and my fate. But ultimately, what determined what I could and couldn't do were politics that permit the intrusion of religion into medicine, especially medicine that as it affects reproductive health, women's health, and maternal health. And in addition, in the end, I had to rely on my luck and, frankly, my privilege to come through that pregnancy alive and with my twins. And it should not be in the United States in 2022 that we are asking women to rely on their luck, and that we are privileging those people who are white and relatively wealthy and who have education for having good outcomes of their pregnancy, and condemning all those who are not those categories to having poor outcomes. That is not what I believe our people want for ourselves in the United States and in 2022.
I mean, what's just so bizarre about this, excuse me, is it's very clear that whether it's, these ectopic pregnancies being banned in Missouri, I mean, it's very clear that this isn't even, it's not about the baby, clearly. And if they want, if there's some sort of religious aspect to this, let's just give them that for a second. If there's some sort of religious aspect in terms of wanting to see a pregnancy carried out, fine. But to attack women's health as a whole, it's bad for society. It's bad for the mother's health. It's bad for the family. I mean, let's use their terms. I don't really get at that point, why? Other than just, I know it sounds bizarre and this is what your book's about, but at the end of the day, I just don't understand. If you're a white man who doesn't want a woman to have autonomy over their body, that's one thing. But it's another thing to basically make it so it's unhealthy. I mean, if you're a white man who wants to have children, you need to have a viable, healthy mother in the most brutal way.
That is the message I'm trying to get out. That's the message, because I think when we think of abortion, right, we see this as a question. The anti-abortion crowd has been very, very effective. There's me looking slightly better.
You look great.
The anti-abortion crowd has been very, very effective in framing this as the woman's life or choices against the baby's life.
Mm.
And that's been effective because you can say, people like babies. Like, why would you not choose the baby in that situation? But what I'm trying to point out is that I was choosing the baby. I wanted this pregnancy.
That's right.
I wanted to come out of the pregnancy with, I didn't think I could have 2 kids. So I tried to gamble. I said, just give me one. Just give me one live baby. I realized the other one's going to die. Just give me one. What procedures could you use to save one?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't save one, just save me, because you want to know what I had at home? Another baby that I was nursing, that
Oh
was
my
sustained by my
gosh.
breast milk. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I I was very efficient. I had 3 kids in 2 years. So,
Are you Irish?
yeah, how'd you know? um, so yeah, I mean it, and so I was trying to save a pregnancy, but you want to know what the flip side of destruction is? Creation. Who saved me was ultimately, when all my hope was lost, when all the doctors had discharged me, who saved me was an abortion doctor, a former abortion doctor, because he told me, with the techniques he knew how to, with the techniques he used and his knowledge that he had to terminate a pregnancy, he used those same techniques and knowledge to save my pregnancy. And what I am trying to say is, when you outlaw training, techniques, words, medicines, and tools, you are outlawing the use of those same things to save wanted pregnancies. And the result of that is you are not going to have people who are being able to bring forth pregnancy and life. I wonder if that's what we really want.
When you talk to politicians who disagree, how have they received, or people in the policy space, I should say, even the anti-abortion policy space, how do they receive this line of thought?
So I used to do a lot of advocacy on Capitol Hill around reproductive rights, and I had a reputation of playing really well with conservatives and Republicans, and conservative Democrats. There are conservatives who are Democrats, and I had a reputation of playing well with everybody. And the reason why is this: because I completely get it. I get the arguments. I get why people feel that their religious beliefs compel them to stamp out abortion, to convince others that abortion is wrong. And they feel compelled, and they feel that their God and their religion is telling them that they have to take over the powers of government and the courts and legislature, and outlaw something that they see as an offense to their religion and to their beliefs. But what I'm also, so I understand that. I come from a family background, I come from a religious background, that's the belief in it. But what I'm also trying to point out is that, number one, we do live in a secular society, right? And not everyone, in fact, not the majority, a small minority of Americans hold those beliefs around abortion. The majority of Americans hold different beliefs because they are of different religious backgrounds. And so if we are allowing one religion to dictate its views on reproductive health or in healthcare in general, we are ceding ground and saying that it's acceptable to have a theocracy in the United States. And I don't think that's what we believe as Americans. In addition, those of us who are religious and who are Catholic are not always adherent to all things in our religion at all times. And if we want to bear those penalties religiously, have the church come at us. Have the church in its own, in our churches and for our religious leaders, correct us. But that's not the role of our secular government, to enforce what is a religious belief or the religious consequences of not following a belief on us. That's the role of those adherents of the religion and those religious leaders of those adherents. So I keep trying to explain that ultimately the question we are facing is one of what is paramount in our society. Is science paramount? Is the health of all of our people, no matter the religion, paramount? Or is it paramount in our society that we construct a theocracy where one religion and one religious view of the minority controls all of us? And I keep begging people, think about when you or someone you love needs any sort of health care. Are you going to allow your doctors and yourself to determine what healthcare you need? Or are you going to put those decisions in the slow and inflexible and not understanding hands of politicians or of hospital ethical boards that are dominated by nuns and priests who don't understand you, don't understand your needs, and don't understand what your family desires for itself? That's what we're doing. That's the future we're constructing for ourselves if Roe v. Wade falls and we permit state after state to restrict various healthcare techniques. And we know the outcome of what this is going to look like for American society. We need to turn only and look at El Salvador, where there are women in prison for having miscarriages, not abortions, spontaneous miscarriages, because of the suspicion, because they were reported as having had a miscarriage, and they couldn't prove that it was just a miscarriage, that they had done nothing to cause that miscarriage. So into prison they go. There are women who are exploding and dying because of ectopic pregnancies, because it is against the law in El Salvador, as it is proposed to be in Missouri, to intervene in an ectopic pregnancy. And so what does the woman do? She suffers horrendously while the physicians refuse to intervene, and she explodes. And if she does not hemorrhage and die, she is in excruciating pain and often is infected and has other terrible outcomes and is rendered infertile. And I wonder, is that what we want for our society? Do we wish to be the same as El Salvador or different than El Salvador? And the choice is ours.
And, it's interesting you say in El Salvador, when there's a report, I mean, in Texas, there's it's like citizens reporting of citizens arrests of someone who either may have received an abortion or given an abortion. I mean, it's bizarro land. This is not what liberal democracies do, in the classic sense. This is not, especially, I mean, it's so retroactive. It's like, I don't understand how we can argue before the UN that we're a liberal democracy if these are the types of bills that are being passed across the country.
Well, I mean, and this is why I think as much as, I'm a lawyer, I'm a member of the Supreme Court bar, I'm married to a member of the Supreme Court bar who, his entire practice is arguing before the Supreme Court. So obviously, I'm focused on the Supreme Court case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is the case that came out of Mississippi that is examining whether states may allow restrictions on pre-viability abortions. No live baby, no live
for
fetus.
Folks. So explain that a little bit more for folks who may not understand.
So what the Supreme Court is trying to decide, and I was about to say it's kind of a red herring, but what the Supreme Court is about to decide is whether states, each individual state, may constitutionally, under the U.S. Constitution, restrict abortion. Currently, Roe v. Wade and then Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which is a case that came after Roe v. Wade, say that states may not restrict pre-viability abortions, and there has to be certain safeguards for the woman, for the woman's health, and what is at issue and after the pregnancy is viable, states may put restrictions on it. But what is at issue in Dobbs is before the pregnancy, the fetus is viable, before whether a state may say no, abortion is not permitted. And that is what 25 states are poised to do the second Roe v. Wade falls, because we believe that the Supreme Court will decide that, yes, it is permissible under the U.S. Constitution to prohibit abortion at all stages of the pregnancy, including before the fetus is viable. Jeez. And so the states are waiting to jump. But we still have an opportunity. We need to take this fight to our states, to our local jurisdictions, if we believe that this is not the type of dystopia we wish to live in.
Yeah.
And before it is too late, we need to be concentrating very hard on what is going on in our state and in our locality to preserve our access to all types of healthcare, to save ourselves and our wanted pregnancies, and to ensure that doctors can make the best healthcare decisions based on science, whether they're related to pregnancy or to other aspects of maternal health, or whether they're not related to pregnancy or maternal health whatsoever, but related to some other thing. It's not the role of politicians to determine our healthcare. It's the role of the patient and her doctor to determine healthcare.
If Roe v. Wade is overturned, if we have to go down that path state by state, fighting, where do you see just like women's health in general going? I mean, I see kind of two paths. Like there's no more funding maybe, which affects many other issues, or Planned Parenthood is raising more money than they can even imagine. And I'm curious, like, how does the industry in general, how does research, which is already limited, how does the actual practice of women's health get affected beyond abortion itself?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, but it's also, again, consider it does not matter what a private organization, how much money it has. If that private organization, Planned Parenthood in this case, in your hypothetical, is prohibited by state law from doing anything in that state. And so again, we're setting up a divided America. We're setting up an America wherein in a few states abortion is going to be permitted, but not just abortion. In a few states, women are going to have to fly or flee when they have a pregnancy like mine and they want fetal surgery to try to save the fetuses, or they want some sort of intervention in an ectopic pregnancy if they live in a state where the Catholic Church has taken over all options for healthcare, or they live in a state where they wish to get a tubal ligation because they can't bear to have their sixth or seventh or eighth child, and they no longer wish to be pregnant all the time. Or they're in a state where they were raped and they're 12 or 13 years old and their hips are too small to bear a pregnancy, and so they wish to terminate that pregnancy. So women are going to be fleeing from states that don't permit abortion in any circumstance, according to the laws and bills that are pending or have been passed in anticipation of Roe falling. And these women are going to be fleeing like internal refugees and migrants to other states that are more permissive and have more science-based healthcare. And again, why are we creating this division amongst our society and in our supposedly secular, democratic America? This is a really, it's not compassionate, but I would also say it's a violation of our democratic ideals, what we are constructing for ourselves. And I keep begging my readers, and I keep begging anyone who's listening to me, so your listeners, to think about this and to intervene locally and with their state politicians before it is too late, because you could very well wind up like me with a wanted pregnancy, but no practical way to save it.
Absolutely. I mean, when this Missouri bill came forward, I thought of my mother. When I had this, I think my first memory, honestly, was I was around 2 or 3 years old. If I don't know if your memories, if you can even have memories then, but I do for whatever reason. You can. I'm sitting next to my mother in a hospital bed, and I remember because of the ice cream cone, because I was that age, I had an ice cream cone with sprinkles, and I was next to my mother's hospital bed. And years later, I learned it was because my mother had an ectopic pregnancy, and she was getting ready to board an airplane with my father to go to San Francisco or something. And she wasn't feeling well in the car. And my dad, I don't know if he would do this today, but my dad was worried about her and took her straight to the hospital. And the doctor said, if you had boarded that plane, you would have died on the plane. But if you had waited a day, you would have died.
Yeah.
And so I think about people who do not have resources, and there will be refugees, but imagine you're unable to leave, you don't have the resources,
and most people don't have those resources, right?
Exactly.
So we know, I mean, just other research that's come out lately, due to the pandemic, what did we learn so much about our fellow Americans? And we found out that the average American does not even have $400 in savings to respond to a medical emergency, not even $400. So, I mean, do you know how much it's going to cost to like board an airplane, get a babysitter for your kids, go get a hotel, and then pay for an abortion? Because, by the way, if an abortion is illegal, they're also going to make insurance coverage of abortion illegal.
That's right.
So all that's going to have to come out of people's pockets. And again, we're creating a society where those with privilege and with wealth are prioritized, and everybody else is thrown under the bus. And that's, again, that is not what we stand for in America. That is not why our nation was constructed. It was constructed as a nation of opportunity for all people, no matter their background and no matter their prior economic circumstance. So I wonder why it is that we are allowing this to occur in our country, and why we've allowed ourselves to be really deceived by this narrative that it is a child's life versus just, a woman's capricious wishes, when in fact it is the pregnant person's life at risk, our democratic ideals at risk, and the question of whether we're allowing the wholesale takeover of our healthcare by a single religion.
Yep. Dark days. Well, this is a must-read book. It's a quick book for folks who want a good weekend read. A good weekend read. You can check it out right now. We have it up on University of Iowa Press. Of course, you can go straight to the publisher or anywhere else to buy books. But it's a fascinating conversation. I urge more men to read these books too, to understand. We have Fridays on our show is called Femme Fridays for a reason. A good chunk of YouTube politics is viewed by men. So, it's important, and our show does very well on Fridays. So we really, really are grateful that you've come on to talk about this, and please, keep us in the loop. We'd love to talk with you more. If there are any developments, you've been able to break it down very simply for us, given the complexities of the law. So we really appreciate it.
I would love to come back and talk with you once the court rules. I mean, I think we're all on tenterhooks to find out what that ruling is, and then what does it mean for us.
Exactly.
So I look
Thank
forward
you very
to
much
for the conversation. Thank you.
Genevieve Grabman, go check out Challenging Pregnancy, a journey through the politics and science of healthcare in America. All right, guys, if this is the time, if you haven't already, make sure to join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Our patrons are what keep this show alive and well. It's how we can do it on the road when I'm filming other stuff. It's how I can, honestly, seriously, it's how I can take all this gear with me on the flight. Because it's expensive to check those bags. Our patrons make sure everything happens. Make sure we have David working his butt off. That is how our community grows, because we can't rely on the algorithms. We know that the algorithms in little places like YouTube and Twitch and all the different spots that we release our show to, you just never can predict. 1 month you're doing kick ass, the other month you're down a certain percentage. It is patrons who keep us going.